Okay, awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Joseph. I'm one of the three graders for 230. So thanks for coming to the review. Tomorrow, how are you guys feeling? Show with like thumbs up, middle, thumbs down. Okay, lots of middles, downs, some ups. Okay, so I know that this is like right before the exam. It's kind of crunch time. So what we're gonna do first, I'll start with a little bit of just like general tips for this exam and early on stuff, and then we'll walk through the practice exam. I'll move somewhat quickly through it, but you guys are welcome to stop me with any questions throughout, and we'll help. And Farah's also here right over there, and she'll help with any questions you have as well. And then so we'll have two people walking around always and helping. If you guys have any questions, so just raise your hand. And then at the end, we'll also have time for questions. So I first wanted to go over just some general things. So I wanted to start with an overall view of the class really quickly. So this class is notoriously hard in ISEN, but also very, very helpful for all of your internships. So it's something that you want to put in the time and effort to learn VBA well, because it will really come back to benefit you, especially in internships, because a lot of industrial engineering internships use VBA very heavily. And then if they don't use VBA heavily, there's also the indirect benefit of 90% of the internships that you have will be using Excel in some capacity. And so a lot of times you'll be assigned some form of tedious task that you have to do in Excel, and you'll be able to just write a few lines of code and do it super quickly, save a ton of time, and use that time to go above and beyond in something else. And that will really help you get ahead in your internship, get return offers, things like that. So VBA overall is just very, very helpful to know. So it's worth putting in the time and effort for that. So I want to talk a little bit about the exam tomorrow. And I wanted to start by going over this sheet that you'll see when you first walk in and just some pointers for it. So the very first thing that you'll see, let's open it here. Okay. So you'll see that it says bring a printed copy of your summary sheet. So this can be found in Canvas, and he will not have copies for you of the summary sheet, which is basically like a VBA cheat sheet. So it's very, very important that there's a printer here tonight that you can use in ETV on the first floor. I'd recommend that because you guys have early exams if you haven't printed it yet. But make sure you bring that, because there won't be any backups or anything on the day of. He won't have any extras to give to you most likely. And so make sure you bring that. It will be super helpful on the exam. And then just scrolling down a little bit, it says save the file as a XLSM file. This is super important because if you just save it as a regular Excel file, whenever you upload it to Canvas or wherever he wants you to upload it, all of that information that you put into your modules will be lost, and we won't be able to grade any of your work. So it's super important that you save it as a .xlsm file. And most likely his start file, I think, does he have it as a .xlsm? Okay, perfect. So that's something I would also just check briefly to make sure at top you see that extension. Okay, then scrolling down a little bit, it says, if you don't know some steps, write codes for the steps you do know. So this is a class where we are able to give you partial credit for what you put down. So like, even if something's not working, you can either comment it out so your code will still run, or you can even comment and say like, this is what I'm forgetting to do, but here's the logic I would have applied, or something like that. Like, don't write us a paragraph, but just put down what you know and move on, because we can't give you any partial credit for a part that you just have nothing for, but we can give you partial credit if you put something down and if that part is partially correct. And then the other thing I'll say about partial credit is we will be most likely more lenient if you properly like indent your code, because I can quickly see like, okay, I understand what they were trying to do. I can catch what's going on, and I can tell you didn't just like attempt to record a macro and everything looks like a mess. And so if it's really easy to read and something's wrong, but I can pinpoint your thought process and you have clean indented code, you're more likely to get more partial credit from one of the graders. All right, and then moving on down here, there's a ton of little things where he says he's going to take off points if you don't do them. So just don't lose points that you don't have to lose. So the main things are the naming convention of the file. Just make sure you follow what he wants. I think it's usually last name and then the number of your computer. So mine would be like Cahill05 if I was sitting in the 5th computer. And then make sure you just have one file that you upload at the end to wherever he wants. Don't have multiple. And then just the basic things of in VBA, have option explicit as your first line, and then have your name as a comment in the second line. So that's something that it would just make me super sad to have to take off any points for that because it's listed here. So just make sure the first thing when you open the console, make sure that it already says option explicit, or if it doesn't, add that in. And then in a comment below, put your name. And then finally, put your code in modules. We'll have modules there. We'll go through this in the practice exam too. But just make sure that your code is sitting in a module and not in a worksheet, because we'll have to take off if it's not in a module. Okay. So I think with that, we can move on to the actual exam. I just wanted to say, if tonight, I know there's not much time in between the exam and between this review and when you're actually taking the exam, but the summary sheet is a great review. If you're just like tomorrow morning, you wake up early and you want like a quick overview of kind of what you need to know, it's really helpful to just read through and see kind of what's on here, make sure you're comfortable, especially with these string functions that will be a big part of probably your third problem. Okay, before we get started, are there any questions? I'll pull up that practice exam. Okay, cool. So we don't need this for now. Yes. The summary sheet or the actual exam? That you'll turn in person, yeah. So you'll bring your summary sheet there to have as a reference guide, and then he'll pass out paper exams that will have the 3 questions on it. And so for that first pivot table problem, you'll actually write down your answers and you'll turn that in because we'll grade whatever you actually physically wrote on the paper. And then for the other 2 parts, you can use it to mark it up as you're going through and coding. And then you'll turn in that whole exam at the end of the period. Yep. All right. Anyone else with any questions? Procedural stuff? Okay. I'm going to try and have this in a separate tab and we'll see if it's readable. It may not be. All right. Okay. So when you, let me hide this. Okay, so the first question that's going to be a chunk of points is pivot tables. And this is something that you should be like excited to do because they should hopefully be easy points. And if you're a little bit shaky on them, hopefully you can work through this with me as we do it and feel more comfortable with it, or ask questions if you're not sure about something. But make sure that you're feeling comfortable going in with pivot tables because this is kind of like a known thing that you can collect your points with. That's pretty straightforward. So we'll go ahead and start. First, you can see up here with the file convention, you'll want to make sure that it's, when you go to save it, you'll see that it is .xlsm. I need to be in full screen, maybe. You'll see .xlsm macro enabled. So that's, seems like he's going to give you this file as a .xlsm, which is good, but just double check that. Okay, so we can go ahead and work through the questions. Does everyone have up their practice exam? Because it's most helpful if we work through this together. So make sure you have the practice exam downloaded, that start file, and that we can work through it. Okay, so the first thing is that he's given us CO2 emissions for the years 2020 and 2017, and it includes countries, country codes, and then things like CO2 in tons and the per capita CO2 and GDP, things like that. And then it looks like we have it classified into regions and subregions. So it's good to just have an idea of what your data looks like. Just take the minute that it takes to understand what the data actually is. So when I look over here, it looks like I have individual countries, and it looks like I just have 1 entry per country that lists all of this information. So I'm going to go back over to the practice exam. Can you guys read this? The practice exam questions, is it clear? Okay. So first, it's asking us for average emissions of per capita PCCO2 for the year 2020 for countries with a GDP between 1,000 and 1,500 billion. Okay, so first, we have to know how to create a pivot table, right? And so you can go to Insert when you're within the table and click Pivot Table, okay? And then it's going to ask you where you want the pivot table, and you can say New Worksheet. And it's going to make this new worksheet over here with a pivot table. So I'm just going to go ahead and for now label this 1A just to keep things nice and neat. All right. So for everyone, that's just go to insert, go to pivot table, and then go to OK, and it'll generate a new pivot table. And the first thing that I'm going to do is we want all of our pivot tables in tabular form. Always is just something that we like to do. It actually shows this way all of the information and all of the column headers and row headers. And so just go to report layout and show in tabular form. I recommend just doing this as soon as you create a new pivot table so you don't forget, because this is something that I think, does he have us dock points if it's not in tabular form? Yeah, so make sure that it's in tabular form because that's going to be important so that we don't have to take off those points. Okay, so now we have a pivot table ready to go, and we just have to figure out what kind of information to put into it. And so here it says we're looking for the emissions for countries with a certain GDP. So the GDP is between 1,000 and 1,500 billion. So I know that if I'm looking for certain GDPs, then I can put that into my rows, right? So I can drag this over here, and I see so many GDPs, right? But I'm only interested in what's between, what was it, 1,000 and 1,500, I think? 1,000 and 1,500. So the way that I can condense this into those groups, does anyone know? Can someone say? Yeah, no, not sort. Group, yeah. So we will be using sort though. So if you right click, you'll see group here, okay? Did everyone catch that? You can right click in any entry and you can go and hit group, okay? And it's gonna give you these parameters. So where do you want the grouping to start? Where do you want it to end? And what do you want the actual interval to be? And so a natural place to start is always at 0, right? Because a GDP could start all the way as low as 0. So I'll start it at 0, and then ending at that doesn't matter too much. I could put any number that I really want, just as long as it's higher than the range that we're interested in. So I'll leave that for now. But by the interval that we're interested in, so we were looking for between 1,000 and 1,500, right? And so that interval width is 500. Does that make sense? So you just subtract the two numbers, and that interval width is 500 that I'm interested in. So I'm going to say by 500 right here. So this will allow us to see the GDP in a category from 0 to 500, and then from 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, which is the one of interest, and then 1,500 to 2,000, and so on. So I'll go ahead and just end it at 2,100, just because we're only interested in this case at 10,000 to 15,000, but that doesn't really matter, just as long as it's something higher than what you're interested in. So I hit OK, and then you'll see that we have the GDP grouped this way, and this will be the one that we're interested in. So then if I go back over to the practice exam, I'll see that it says we want the average admissions of per capita PCCO2 for 2020. Okay, so those are the values that I'm interested in. That's what I want to know based on these GDPs. And so I'm going to go to PCCO2 2020 and drag that into values. And then does anyone know why this won't give us the right answer right now? Yeah, it's not the average. So right now it's just summing for all of these countries. So for every country that falls into this GDP bucket, it's just summing their per capita CO2 emissions. And so we want to go over here, go to value field settings, and change this to average. Okay, I think I did that way too fast. So you go to the values, you click value field settings, and then summarize values as, and you can choose average. You can also right click right here and do the same thing with your value field settings. Okay, so then we were interested in this number right here, 6.455, right? Because we're looking at the GDP and then the per capita emissions. And so that's our answer. Does that make sense? Does anyone want me to repeat any part of that? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes, you probably could. Let's see. So insert pivot table. Pivot tables are very friendly in terms of changing it to certain formats. Oh, yeah. No, we won't take off. No, it does. As long as you have the correct answer, it's not an issue. Yeah. So when you did it that way, did you get the same? Okay, then perfect. Yeah. As long as we can see at the end, like we want to see, do you have a pivot table And like, did you clearly just look at that pivot table and get your answer? Like, we don't want to see you using all kinds of like functions and sums to get your answer, because at that point you would just use formulas with the original data set. So we just want to see you have some kind of functional pivot table that allowed you to quickly get the piece of information you're looking for. Yes, that's fine. I would like, yeah, it's fine. We just like it. We should be able to change the filters and see like that you did use it that way. Slicers are usually more helpful whenever you're like, if you're sending a file to someone and you want them to see like how you could see all the different results, because then like the person you send your file to can quickly just use the slicer to see another version. But we're not going to take off if you do that for filters. I'm not going to take off. Farah, you're not going to take off. Okay, so right, but here I'm thinking here, see, it's asking two different questions. You can use the same pivot table. Yeah. Yeah. So if he's kind of like section something off as a question part, make sure that you have like a worksheet to go with it that has a pivot table in it. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay, this is the part where it's nice because he just gives you kind of like free points if you know how to double click. So it says how many countries are in this group, right? So right over here, this was the answer that we were interested in. We're looking in this range. And the way that you can drill down into the data to see the actual data points that gave us this average, you just double click into this cell, right? And then it's going to give you all of the information where it pulled from, right? Like right here, if I look at the, let's see, if I look at the per capita CO2 emissions for 2020 and I sum over those and I look at the average down here in the corner, it's 6.455. Like that's the value that we just got. So this is just giving you the individual entries and all of that information. So he wants to know how many countries. Well, the answer is 6, right? 6, count 6 down here. So you just write 6. And then he asks, what are those countries in terms of their country codes? And you just list these 6 country codes. All right, is that clear to everyone? Just double click. That's all you have to do if he asks for the specifics about the value that you just found in a pivot table. Okay, so next it says we are looking for the average emissions per capita for the year 2020 for countries with a GDP between 1,000 and 15 billion. Okay, that's the same thing that we just did. So we probably don't have to do too much work. And then it says, and population between 200 and 300 million. The beauty of pivot tables and the reason why we use pivot tables is because you can change values on the X and Y axes, right? So you can change your rows and columns. And so I can click into this. Okay, and just one tip, one random thing. If you happen to close out of this and you can't figure out how to get back to your value field settings, you can go to pivot table and analyze, and then over here you'll see field list, okay? I know sometimes people click out of that and then they're like, crap, I can't get back into where I need to be. So that's just a helpful aside. But it's asking us now to look at population. And so that's another variable I want to consider. So I'm going to put it into columns, right? And so you see all of these values, again, just like before, that aren't that helpful because we're only interested in the countries between 200 and 300 million. So I'm going to go ahead and use group once again. And then here we have a similar thing with starting at, I'm going to start at 0. I'm ending at, it really doesn't matter. Like just to show I can end at like 10,000. It really doesn't matter, even though that's way too big. Okay, so if I'm looking at between 200 and 300 million for population, what do you suggest that I put for the by value? 100, right? Just take the difference and that's what we're looking at. So I'm going to type 100 here and hit OK. And you'll see right here we have our 100 to 200 category that we're interested in. And we're looking in this category of 1,000 to 1,500. But I just want to verify real fast that it's asking for the average emissions again. Yes, and it is. So we're looking at 200 to 300 for this category, and we have the value of 2.1. So that should be the answer. Let's check. Yeah, 2.1 right here. And then again, he just asked for the countries and the country codes. So I'll double click into the cell, and I see that we have 2 countries, and I'm going to put the codes as IDN and BRA. All right. So that's part A. Does that make sense to everyone? What questions do you have, if any? I know that one's just kind of like a repeat from the first one. Yeah. So I usually look at like when I read the problem, I think of two things. The first thing is what information are they having us use kind of like as a deciding factor? And so the first question that we read, it said like it wants countries with a certain GDP. And so I always put that deciding factor in the rows. So I put that into the rows because I'm able to easily filter or manipulate or group or anything like that. And then I look for the second thing, which is what actual values they're looking for. So this said, what are the average emissions? And so that's what I put into the values field. And then beyond that, if it asks for other variables, I put it into columns so that I can see both variables on columns and on rows. And then that's basically like how I do it. Does that make sense? Okay, yep. Yeah, you could use filters. You can also just make like that you can put multiple variables on rows and on columns too, but I don't think I've ever seen an exam where that was the case. But yeah, you can definitely do that. Yeah, and any other questions? I saw, yeah, here. So this created, if you can tell, its own worksheet, right? And so I would just click back into whatever worksheet I was actually interested in. So the pivot table 1A here. So it's not like really something to go back to, like, and you can't drill down into like the drill down, obviously. So it's just like unidirectional. Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right. So now it's asking us to create a new pivot table to answer the following. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the original problem and I'm going to create a new pivot table. So you can go to insert new pivot table or you can do Alt N, either way works. And then you can see pivot table is option V there. So Alt N V, either way. And then I'm going to click OK to put it in a new worksheet. And the first thing I'm going to do is what? Tabular, yeah. Okay, so design, report layout into tabular. Okay, now let's see what it's asking us. It says it wants the subregion with the largest total population. So going back to your question about what do you put where, so it's asking us for specific subregions. We're looking at subregions. So I'd put that into the rows. And then the value that it's looking for is total population. So I put that into values. So here, I'm going to put, let's see, was it region or subregion? Subregion, thank you. So I'm going to put subregion into rows, and I'm going to put population into values, okay? Now, what's wrong with this? Yeah, so right here, it's giving me the count of the population. And so here, what it's saying is that in the subregion of Australia and New Zealand, it's counted that there's 2 entries. That's what count means. It goes in and it sees how many entries do you have. So like, of course, this is going to be counting the population of Australia and New Zealand, like those 2 countries, and it's just returning, okay, there's 2 entries there. But we're interested in seeing what the total population is of both Australia and New Zealand, right? And so you go into value field settings, and it's not asking for the average of those 2. It's asking for you to sum up the population of each of the individual countries within the subregion. And so you're going to go into value field settings and hit sum, and then hit OK. And it gives you all of this information, and it asks you for the largest value. So what I would recommend is on an exam, if you're just looking through this and trying to see what the largest value is, you may miss the largest value. So the easiest way to go about this is just if you right click and you say sort, and you can say sort largest to smallest, and then it will just give you that largest value on top. So this prevents you from just like missing the fact that this was the largest value. So if I go back, I'll see that our subregion was Southern Asia and our population was 2007.55. Any questions on that one? All right. And then it says the subregion of Africa or Oceania with the largest total population. So here, there's 2 ways to go about it. First is slicers, second is filters. So first, I'll show slicers. So you can go ahead and insert, and then I'm going to hit slicer. And it's going to ask me what information do I want to slice out or do I want to filter out? And so it said specifically it's looking for just Africa and Oceania. So I'm going to hit region, right? Because those are regions that I'm looking to filter out. And it's going to give me this slicer. So I want to look at, was it Africa? Sorry, I have short memory. Okay. Yes, Africa and Oceania. So I'm going to hit Africa, and then I'm going to try and hit Oceania, but it's not going to work because multi-select isn't checked. So make sure you click this multi-select box and you select both. And then that should be our answer right there. The largest of these two is Sub-Saharan Africa with 1115.91 million. Okay. Do slicers make sense? Okay. Now we're going to do the filter method really quick, just in case you're not comfortable with slicers. So here, I'm going to add in a filter. So I'll go to data, or maybe I won't go to data. Let's see. Value filters. Okay, here, I'm going to do it from the pivot table. So region, we specifically want to filter by region. So I'm going to drag this into the filter column, right? And it's going to give me this filter up at the top. And then it'll have all of them selected originally. And if I just want Africa and Oceania, I can just check those two, click OK, and there's our answer again. So same thing, you can just access it by taking that area of interest and dragging it into filters and then selecting the value. Do filters make sense to you? Okay, it doesn't matter as long as one of them makes sense to you, because if you can do one, you'll get the points. Any questions about slicers or filters before we move on? Okay, then we'll move on. And it says create a pivot table to answer what is the region with the largest population as a percentage of the total population. So I'll go ahead and create a new pivot table. Remember, insert pivot table, OK, and you have to do tabular every single time. Report layout, show and tabular. Okay, now we're interested in looking at the region with the largest population as a percentage of total population. So I'm going to put region, which is our area of interest, into the rows. And then I'm going to put population, which is the value that we're looking for, into our values, right? This returns the count, which we've already established is no good unless you want to know how many specific entries in this data set are tagged to the region of Africa. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into value field settings, and I'm going to change it to be the sum, right? So it will add up all of the populations like before. But he said he wants the population, the total population, as a value, as a percentage of the total population for all regions. So you'll go over here to show values as, and then click down on the calculation tab, and you'll say as a percent of the grand total. And so here you'll see, is he looking for something in particular? Oh, with the largest population. So again, I'm going to sort this from largest to smallest, and I'm going to see that it's Asia with 59.17%. And that's our answer. Okay, that's pivot tables. Yes, question. Slicers, yeah. So right here, I'm going to take off this filter. Okay, so for slicers, this was the information we were looking at, but we wanted it only specifically for region. And so I went to insert and then slicer. And then we wanted to look specifically by region. So I clicked region, okay. And then the little multi-select option, so I could select multiple at a time. And the question was asking specifically for Africa and Oceania. So I could select just those. And then this was our answer. Does that make sense? Sorry, can you say it a little louder? Yeah. So it's just insert and then slicer. You see it? Okay. All right. Any other questions before we move off of pivot tables? I can see, I think I have, this was y'all's exam, I think 1 year ago, right? I'm pretty sure. I remember.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I was curious about how many points. I think it's, did he tell? You know? Yeah, for pivot tables. 30. Okay. So this is like hopefully 33 points. Feel comfortable with them. Go through this. Make sure you can do it quickly.
I don't know.
If you
Yeah,
have questions, stay after, work through it, let us know. But like these should hopefully be 33 points. Like we just want to check quickly and see that you all got all the right answers. Yes. I would try and do it as quickly as you possibly can. Like, so I can't give like a specific time, because if you're stuck on something, then I recommend going on to problem 2 and problem 3. But I think whenever I was taking this class and I like was doing the practice exam, I think I tried to time myself and like be able to do it in 10 minutes or something, which is probably like super fast, but just like try with practicing to do it as quickly as possible. Rework the homework that he gave you if you have time. Do this practice exam if you have time, and just see like repetition, how quick you can get with it, and like try to set a really aggressive goal for yourself, like 10 minutes if possible, so you can spend the rest of the exam on the others. I don't want to scare anyone saying 10 minutes. It's just like, it's good to be more ambitious, I guess, with how quickly you move through that first one. All right. That's it for pivot tables, so we can move on to problem 2.
Thank you.
And then I'll just say, like, it'd be nice if you could label these for us, 1A, 1B, etc. These aren't going to match exactly because I'm just doing it right now. But like as you go along, it's helpful to name these files so that we can look at your pivot tables. All right, so that was problem 1. And now we can move on to problem 2. Okay, let me see if I can just copy all of this into VBA if it won't hate me. So that's a little easier to see. Okay, first things first. Let's imagine worst case scenario, you sit down at at your computer, and you don't see any like developer tab or anything like that, and you like don't know what to do. Okay, right here. I had someone before for an exam showed up and they like couldn't figure out how to get into VBA. So they couldn't like do anything in VBA. So that was very sad paper to grade. But what you do is file, you click into options, and you want that developer tab to show up in your ribbon. So I'll go to customize ribbon. And then here on this list under D, you should find developer. So right here, you see developer under main tabs, and you click OK. And now here it is, the developer tab. Okay. It should be open on all your computers when you first open it up, but that's just something good to know. Yes. Well, then we'd move you to another computer in like the classroom tomorrow, but like it doesn't open at all options. Are you on 360 perhaps? I can look after. I have no idea. Okay. Or Farah can look now, either way. Okay. So click into developer, and we're going to be doing this in Visual Basic. So I'm going to open that up, and I'm just going to put my code to the side here, my Excel, so that you can see that. I'll make it kind of small because I don't think it'll be relevant for a little bit, hopefully. Okay, so the first thing when you open up VBA, you'll see that there's this information. So you have the worksheets. So these are some of the worksheets I just created. It's a list of all the worksheets, and then a module. So in this file, he's given you a module, so that's where you should put your code. If you happen to open the exam tomorrow and he hasn't put a module in there, then put in a module, because your code always has to be in a module. So go to insert and then module here, okay?
Thank you.
So I'll click into the module, and then it should say option explicit immediately, but if you open it up and it doesn't, then you have to write that, because you'll lose points if you don't have option explicit. So this is the first thing that you should always do. Basically what option explicit does is it yells at you if you haven't defined a variable that you're trying to use somewhere in your code. So it makes it super helpful at all times to make sure that you can debug your code and that you have working variables throughout. So always, no matter what, like if you're doing something in VBA, put option explicit at the top of the page. There's no reason not to. And then right after that, just put your name. Always put your name, because he has this as a points item. And so always put your name directly under that option explicit. Okay, now let me try to attempt the feat of copying all of this into VBA and hoping that it like preserves some form of format. Let's see. Okay, I feel like that's good enough. And then I can go to, oh no, I don't have my usual comments. It's what? View. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Can I put this here, maybe? All right, awesome. Thank you very much. Okay. So we'll close this. And it says, using the developer tab, place a button on the worksheet named problem 2, and in VBA, create a new module and place a sub called problem 2. Okay. And when the button is clicked, the VBA sub you create will do the following. So that's just a general, we need to put a button into our code. Yes. So that's where I went to view and then toolbars and edit, which they just showed me. And then basically there's a button right here where you can like uncomment a whole block at once. It's this one. And then you can also uncomment a whole block at once. But like you don't have to do that. You can also just manually type your little like apostrophe, what quotation, there we go. Third time's the charm. Okay, so first thing it's asking us to do is create a button. So your button, yes. Yeah, don't copy because you're gonna have a paper exam in front of you and you're gonna waste your time copying in the code. So just do comment A if you have time. Like, I mean, I would love you if you did that, but if you don't do it, it's not the end of the world. We're not gonna take up points. But please, like, if you put A, it makes our life so much easier. Okay, so you want a button. You don't want a regular shape button. You want a button that's tied to VBA, that's tied to a macro. So you go to the developer tab and you go to insert, and then you see this right here button. So you click that and you make your button. And I'm just gonna hit OK for now because there's no macros that I've created. And I can right click and I can say edit text, or you can just click into the text either way. And he asked us to call it problem 2. So I'm gonna say problem 2. And that's my button. And that's like free 2 points right there probably. So super nice. Okay. Now he wants us to link this to an actual sub in VBA. So let me move this over. So I'm going to create a sub called problem 2. And then it's immediately going to give me this end sub. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it down so that all of our comments are within that. All right. And then I think that's everything he asked in that first question. So place a sub. When the button is clicked, the VBA sub you create should run the code. So I'll go back to my button. I'll right click my button and I'll hit assign macro. Did everyone see that? Go back to the button, right click and go down to assign macro. And then you'll see the list of all of the macros that exist within VBA that you've created. So I see problem 2 because I just created that sub. And so I'll click on that and hit OK. And this means whenever I click problem 2, it will go to that sub and launch the sub. Okay. All right, so now we can get started. So it says, first, it wants us to define variables int I, int j, and int k as integer variables. So what's the key word for when you want to define a new variable? Dim, right? Dimp int I as integer, right? And then you can do the same thing, dim int j as integer, dim int k as integer. Another quicker way you can do it is you can just do commas, right? You can do int j as integer, int k as integer, right? So now we have defined 3 integer variables. All right, now it says define a range variable and name it range cost 1. Okay, so I'm going to define something. I'm always going to go back up to the top of my sub and define it, just because it's more convenient for me to look up and see everything at the top has been dimmed up there. And so I'm going to say dim range cost 1 as range, okay? It says, and name it range cost 1. Okay, we did that. So that's done. Okay. Now, it says, assign this variable cells E2 to E11 in worksheet problem 2. Okay, so I want to set range cost 1 specifically equal to some value. And I want to set it equal to the range in a certain area. So what is something that's specific to range variables that you always have to do? Like, okay, so let me show you this. If I say int I equals 1 or equals 2, I'm going to have no issues whatsoever. But if I say range cost 1 is equal to, and then you put some range, what will be the issue with this? The code won't run. And why? And just pretend like everything that I did here was correct, like A2 to A3. Okay, why will this give me an error? And why will you not be able to move on with your code? Yes. No, okay, sorry. So I think I'm getting ahead of myself. But basically, range variables you always have to set. So it's something that's so weird to only range variables, and you always have to do it. So you have to say set range cost 1 equal to whatever you want it equal to. So you can't just say range cost 1 equals so-and-so. You have to use the set keyword. So let me go over here to your summary sheet. Look, object variables are set. Set range 1 equals, and then whatever the range is. And so you don't have to do this with any other types. You just have to do it with ranges. But like, I want to drill this into your head right now. If you have a range variable, you have to do set the range variable name equals whatever it is. If you forget set, your code won't run. The error code won't be helpful, and you'll be stuck. So like, remember, always set your range variables. Okay, so it says assign this variable cells E2 to E11 in worksheet problem 2. So I said set this, and then I'm specifically looking at worksheet problem 2. So I first need to tell VBA that I'm looking at worksheet problem 2. So I can just say, I'm going to look over here and I see
what's the plan?
It's called problem 2, or the code name is S2. So for now, I'm just going to say S2 dot, then I'm going to say range. Make sure you put your parentheses. I'm looking at E2 to E11.
Oh, you don't want anything.
Okay. This is the same exact thing as saying worksheets, and then in parentheses, problem 2 dot range E2 to E11.
I don't know.
Right. Okay. So does it make sense why these are the same? Has he talked about code names? And yeah, I think he for sure has code names, tab names, the difference. Yes. Okay, we'll review really quickly. But basically, the first one that's not commented out, that's the code name that's not in parentheses over here when you look at everything that you have in your environment. So you have S2, and that's a code name. So that can never change. Like, no user can go in and change a tab name and change S2. S2 is set unless it's changed in VBA. No, just regular Excel user can change that. And then if you see over to the right where I used worksheets and then problem 2 in parentheses, that's referring to the tab name. And so if I go into Excel, and if a user was to say, okay, this is now problem 230, if I come back into my environment, you see that that tab name has now changed to problem 230. So this is why sometimes it's helpful to use code names, because in this case, if I were to use this second line of code that says worksheet problem 2, well, worksheet problem 2 no longer exists, so the code would throw a bug, but the code name never changes. So that's just an aside, because I know in past exams he's asked about that, but it's not super relevant to this problem. But does that make sense to you guys? The difference between the two? Yes.
Huh? Ask her. I'll ask her.
So I always use it as like a check on whether my code is right or not. So VBA will always capitalize it if it recognizes it like as a variable or as a keyword. And so like, for example, range is a keyword. So I would expect, I kind of like to type it lowercase, because just when I hit enter, I like see it turn into uppercase, and I know like, okay, VBA recognized that code. So VBA is not like case sensitive. So it doesn't matter if you do it or not. The only thing that's case sensitive is when you create your own personal variable, that capitalization has to stay the same throughout. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Just because I don't have this one doesn't mean.
So no, this doesn't matter. It's actually the exact same as not being capitalized, because in Excel, Excel is not case sensitive. So I'll just show you really quickly. Let's do range cost 1. This is a helpful debugging tip. So you can say dot select. And then if I'm going to go into this code and run it real quick, it actually selects whatever this variable is. Now, and I'll just show to demonstrate that it's not case sensitive. If I go lowercase e2 to E11 and click off of it, and I run this sub again, the same thing's going to be selected. It's just like if here I say equals B1, it goes to B1, or let's say B2 so you can see it clear. B2 is the exact same as if you were to say capital B2. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. All right. So let's move on. So we already verified we had our correct range because we selected it, which is helpful for debugging if you have extra time. And now it says, using VBA, define a range name, call it cost2, that refers to cells D11 to D20 in worksheet problem 3. Okay, so I specifically want to look at problem 3, that worksheet, right? So I'm going to go over to the code name right now, and I'm going to say S3 dot range, and it told me I'm specifically looking at D11 to D20, and I need my quotation marks in here. All right, and then I can say dot name and set it equal to whatever the name is. So here I'll say cost2. And then, does anyone know what's wrong with this? Why this won't work? Say it again. So this is a property, so it's a little bit confusing. Yeah, so first, the correct answer is I want to set a name specifically. And so just like how we did number format, and you saw me mess up like before this exam started on number format, it's something that you need to put in parentheses because the name is a string, right? And so I need to say, I'm setting this string equal to specifically cost2 in quotations. So going back to the question before about setting it, this is a property and not a variable. And so I'm saying I want to look at a certain range within the problem 3 worksheet. And then with dot name, I just want to get whatever the name is of that range, but I haven't defined any specific range variables in VBA. So because of this, because I didn't have to dim anything, I don't need the set keyword. Does that make sense? I forgot who asked that, but does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Now, using the range variable and range name defined above, using the worksheet function max calculate. Okay, let me make this a little bit clearer for us to see. Okay. So using the range variable and the range name defined above, using the worksheet function max, calculate the sum of the max in cells E2 to E11 in worksheet problem 2. Okay, so this is what we defined up here. And then the max in cells D11 to D20 in worksheet problem 3. So that's going to be referring to this range name that we set over here. Before we move on, I just quickly want to say this range name, you can check, you can go in and select whatever the range is, and hopefully, oh, I need to actually run the code. So let's do that. I'll go here, I'll run it. Hopefully no errors, cool. And we're looking at D11 to D20. So when I go there, I highlight everything and look up here. It says cost2. So that's how you can check it. Another way is you can go into formulas, and I think there's something called like name manager, and you'll see cost2, and that's the range that you've just defined. So I just wanted to show a little visual of what it's actually doing. Yeah. So on these computers, they should always be enabled. But if you're in a .xlsm, then it should work. And I don't know, like there should be no reason that they're disabled, but I'll show you if they are. You can go to File. You can go to, usually there's like a Trust Center. Maybe there's not. Okay. Trust Center, thank you. And then I could say Trust Center settings, I think, and then macro settings, and I can say trust, enable all macros. That should not ever be an issue on these computers, but is that like, does that make sense? Did I do it too fast? Options, which is not working for you, so we'll have to see. We'll talk after. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. So here it says we want to set all of this equal to a double variable named double answer, right? And so I want something to be called double answer. And I don't need to use set, right? Because this isn't a range variable. This is a double variable. But I need to dim the variable. And so up above, I'm going to say, right up here, I'm going to say dim double ans as double. Okay. Then down here, I'm going to set it equal to, it says worksheet function max. So it wants the max of the first range cost 1, and then it wants the max of this second cost 2, and it wants us to sum the two together. And so the keyword that you use, this is on your summary sheet, is worksheet function, okay? Worksheet function dot, and then it gives you all these options, right? And these are what are available in Excel. So one is max. And then I can say I want it to look specifically at a certain range. So in this case, it's range cost 1. Does that make sense to everyone? And then here I can say I want to add the second one. So worksheet function dot max. And then I want to set this equal to cost 2, right? Because I now have, so what I did here is I went into Excel and I manually made it set a group in problem 3, that column equal to cost 2. And so by calling cost 2, then it's going to refer to that specific range. Okay, and then when I click off of it, you can see that we have the capitalization happen automatically. And then a little helpful tool is you can use debug.print, and I'll say double answer, just to check and make sure that I'm kind of getting what I want, and I can step through that code. So I'll step through it, and there's some error here. So let's see what we've done. Range cost 1. Does anyone see the error? Plus worksheet. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, dot range, max dot range. Yeah, thank you. Max dot range, and then range cost 1. And then here I will do max dot range. Or here I think I can just do cost 2. What? Because this one is a range. Oh, I see. Yeah. Dot range cost 2. So let's see. Oh, instead of range cost 2. Let's see. And our answer is 13.8. Okay. Okay, so let's see why I screwed up. So worksheet function dot max range cost 1. Okay, so this is passing that range into the max worksheet function. And I have worksheet function dot max, the range, and then in that range, I have the range name. Okay, so an argument of range could be your range name. Just like whenever you say you want the range of A2 to A3, in this case, you're saying you want the range that is cost 2, and we've defined cost 2 right up here to be equal to that D11 to D20 range. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. All right. Now it says read from cell A1 in worksheet problem 2, the column where the result will be placed. Yeah. Yes. So here we have it as a variable. And so in this variable, we're essentially passing in this value, right? So you can imagine this is entering this argument. So we're looking at the max for problem 2 at the range E2 to E11. And then down here, what we've done with this line is we've gone into problem 3, that worksheet, and we've set cells D11 to D20 equal to be called a range name called cost 2. And so here I'm looking for the maximum, but I have to say, what is the range, right? So I have to say the range, and then it needs an argument of what those cells are. So here what we did is we said D11 to D20 is equal to cost 2. And so this is just subbing that in for that as a range name. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So now we have read from cell A1 in the worksheet problem 2, the column where the result will be placed. Cell A1 will have something like D. Okay, so here we go. But I want to look at Excel for this too. I'll change this back to problem 2. Okay, so you see over here in A1, he's put a letter, right? And so he wants us to read that in. And then it says the cell to place the result calculated in part E. Oh, I wasn't supposed to split this up. Okay. Is the column specified in cell A1 and the row is equal to the rounded integer of the sum calculated in part E. Okay, so rounded integer. So basically, remember we saw what double answer was equal to. We saw like 13.8. So we'd expect that rounded integer to be a 14. So first, VBA is going to go into A1 and collect that letter, so D, and then it's going to collect the rounded double answer, which should round to 14. So now we're looking at D14. So it should paste this answer into D14 of Excel. So that's kind of like the high level pseudocode reason that we're doing it. So let's actually do it now. Okay, so I'm going to say, I see width statements are coming below, but I can just say range. And then the first thing I want to do is I want to look at A1. So I'm looking at a range. So specifically, it wants me to print it in problem 2. So I'll say S2 dot, and then this is usually where I put range, right? And then usually you would put some range, or you would put in parentheses. Remember, we said it should be something like D14. And so that's what we essentially are trying to do. But we have to actually go in and first get this D, and then we have to get the 14. And so what I can say first is I want to get the range that is in cell A1. And then I also want to get the sum of double. And so do you guys remember how to convert from a double to an integer, what the keyword is for that? Cint, convert to integer, right? Cint, and then I'll say double answer. All right. And then I'll say dot select for now to see if I've made a mistake with that. And you can see here, when I hit run, it goes to D14. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so now we don't want to just go to the cell, but we want to paste in the answer. And so I'll say dot value equals double answer. So if I run that, you'll see that's our answer, right? Any questions? Okay. And now it says place in the result. Okay, got it. And then using VBA code and a nested with, end with, change the format property of the cells. Okay, so it's going to ask us to do a bunch of formatting things now. And you can expect to see this for sure as a part of it tomorrow is formatting using widths and end widths. So make sure that you're comfortable with this as we go through it. Okay, so let's see. It says you want a width and an end width statement. So first I'm going to say width, and then I'm going to copy in this cell. And I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to give me an end width. No, it's not going to give me an end width. So I have to type in end width, or you're going to get an error coming up later. Okay, so it's saying with this cell, which is equal to D14, you want to do different things with the answer. So first, you want to set the value equal to double answer, right? And so that's what we did above, but I'm just going to consolidate it and put it all right there. All right, so first I'm setting the value. Okay, let's see what else it's asking for. So it's saying displayed as a number with exactly 3 digits to the right of the decimal point. So I'm going to say dot. Okay, this is your turn to explain to me what I have to put because you asked the question before. So what goes here? This is number format, and it wants 3 to the right of the decimal place, I think. Let's see. Exactly 3 digits to the right of the decimal place and at least 4 digits to the left of the decimal place. So it wants it in this format. So I got to do dot number format, right? And then set it equal to something. And so what should I put here? If I need 4 before the decimal and 3 after the decimal. Three more zeros, right? And this time I put it in quotation marks, so make sure you do that as well. All right, so if I run this, it should shorten this to be in this format. Let's see. Yeah, you can see it here. It's changed so that there's 4 before and 3 after. Does everyone understand what we did here? And so if, for example, it said like you don't have to put anything after the, or let's just say like you only need to put the first two to the left of the decimal place, and anything beyond that is optional, then I could have put this hashtag here. And when I run the code, it would just show me that 13.8. But by putting another 0, that shows that I now have to make it 0, 13. And then with the comma, it shows that I have to show all the way to the thousands place, even if there's nothing in that value. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand hashtags versus zeros for formatting? Okay, yes. It's helpful for especially in the leading or in the trailing digits, so after the decimal point. So think like if your number is 0.21 and then like 20 zeros, you probably don't care about the zeros, but you would care if there was another digit after. And so here, like you could say, I want it all the way up to this many decimal places, but only if it's a value that's not a 0. Does that make sense? Like only if there's stuff further on that's actual values and not just 0. Okay. All right. Good questions. So 0, 0, 0, we'll put that back. Okay. So we did that. And now it says, in addition, change the background color to green. Okay. So I'm going to say, do you guys remember what this is to change the background color? Interior, right? Interior. And then dot color. Yeah. And it says to green, and it's always a safe bet to just type VB and then whatever it asks for. So VB green. And when I hit enter, I see it's been capitalized. So it recognized that as a color, which is awesome. Okay. Now it says with red, bold, and italic font. So these are 3 characteristics of the font. So this is the perfect place to use the nested with statement that it asks for. And notice like it specifically says nested with, end with. And so you need to use a nested because it's specifically asking for that. And so here I would say with dot font, right? Because I'm specifically interested in the font. I'm trying to change those properties. And I'll have an end with so I don't forget. Okay. And then for our font, we're looking at the color, dot color, and we're setting it equal to red, right? But it's not just red, it's VB red. And Excel recognizes that. And then I'm going to set bold. I want it bolded. And so here I can say dot. And if you're just like confused, you can either look at your summary sheet or you can look down at your options and see if anything applies. So I see a dot bold. So I'll click on that. And then dot bold is probably going to be true or false, right? But I want it to be bolded. So I'll say true. And it turned blue. So VBA recognizes that as a keyword. And then italic, I'll probably assume it's called italic. Yep, it is. If you're not sure, it's on your summary sheet. And you can set it equal to true as well. All right, and then I have that end with. So I'll go ahead and delete this, and I'll step through my code real quick. So you can see now I'm in this specific range. I'm getting the value for double answers, 13.8, this long number. And then I'm going to format it to be how it shows with 4 before and 3 after. And then I want to set the interior color to VB green, right? So it's green. Now with dot font, I want to change the color of the font to red. So that should do this. This should do it. And then I want to bold it there. I want to make it italics, in italics. And then I'm going to end. And that is the end. Yes. Yeah, if it doesn't ask, so you can always nest. We're not going to take off points ever if you nest or have like cleaner looking code than he's asked for. It's always best to have these indentations. I shouldn't say always best. There are some exceptions, but what you would do is you would, yeah, exactly what you said. You just do this dot font and dot color, dot font and dot bold, etc. Dot font dot italic is true, and you just run this, and it would do the exact same thing. But this is what I do not recommend doing. So if it says nested, then always do it as nested. But I'll just show here that if I delete this, it'll all do the same thing. See? Okay. Other thing I want to say is don't forget your dots because there will be errors. So what with statements do is it's saying with, and then this is an object, right? This is an object. And then we're defining all of these properties down here with the dots that attach to the objects that tell them what you need to know about the object. So this is saying with D14, we're treating cell D14 like an object or as a range. And here we're saying we want to now attach properties to it. So we're giving it values. We're giving it a value. We're changing the interior. We're changing the font color. But if I was to just put font.italic, it's going to throw an error because this dot is basically reattaching the dot to the actual object up here. So make sure that you have those dots before your properties. Yes. E. This. Okay. Yes. So, like in terms of, is the confusion over these range names like this versus this, or is it worksheet function? Okay. Yes, but can we talk after about it? Okay. Awesome. I just want to move on to 3 and keep us on schedule and make sure you guys have enough time. I'll be here late, but I know you guys have an early exam, so I'll be here as long as y'all have questions, but I just want to make sure I can get through it for those that want to go home and get sleep. Okay. So, but keep interrupting me along the way, especially with this third question, with anything that you have. So problem 2, generally, are you guys feeling okay about it? First, pivot tables, thumbs up, middle, or thumbs down? I hope to see a lot of thumbs up. Okay, but no pressure. Okay, cool. And then problem 2, in terms of defining variables, remembering that you have to set range variables, working with end statements. Okay, how do you feel? Thumbs up, middle, down? Okay, still okay. It's a little bit better hopefully now, but I'll be here for any questions afterwards. Okay, now we're moving on to the third problem, which is very heavy in string manipulations. So let's go back to the practice exam if I still have it somewhere. Okay. So this one will be probably a little bit harder to copy in. But first, I'm just going to read the top tab. So place a button on the worksheet called problem 3. When it's clicked, it should be tagged to your macro. Okay. And then it says in the following items, put your first name as the title and input and message boxes. So we'll deal with that later. But first, I'm going to go to problem 3. I'm going to go to developer and I want to put in my button, right? And so I'm going to put insert button right here, draw it, and I'm going to tag it to something, but that something doesn't exist yet because I haven't created a sub called problem 3. So I'm just going to click OK. Then I'm going to go into VBA and below, look, all of problem 2 is encapsulated within this sub problem 2 all the way down to end sub. So you have to go below that. You can't create a sub within a sub. And so here I'm going to say sub now problem 3. And I'll create that. And we have our end sub. So now I can go back to my button. I can right click it. I can say assign macro and I can call it problem 3. Similarly, if I want to edit the text, I can right click, edit text and do problem 3. I went fast because we did the same thing for question 2, but any questions about that or are we good? Okay. All right, so I'm going to copy in this code really quickly and hope it's not too much of a mess. Okay, looks okay as long as we don't have to go back and forth between Excel too much. Okay, so using VBA code, read a full name from cell A1 in worksheet problem 3 and assign it to a string variable, okay? So let's go here. So first thing I'm going to do is I see it says assign something to a string variable. So I'm going to dim a string variable, right? And it's specifically a name. So I'm going to call it string name, right? Dim string name as string. Okay. So the program should run for any name. Okay. So, and I'm collecting this from A1 in problem 3, right? So I can say string name is equal to, and then I'll say, I'm looking specifically at the problem 3 worksheet. So here I'm going to say S3 code name. You could also do the worksheets problem 3 either way. I'm going to say range and A1. And then I'm going to do debug.print just to prove to you, hopefully, that that works. Okay, so I'm going to do view, immediate window. debug.print, and it got that name down there. Okay. Okay. So we got the name. It should run for any name. Okay. Assume that both the first name or last name is long and separated by one or more spaces. Got it. Okay, so now get the first name and the last name from the string and assign them to a string variable string fn, so first name, and string ln, last name, respectively. The first name and last name shouldn't have any blanks and have the first letter capitalized and all of the letters lowercase, okay? So I need two more variables, so I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to dim these. So I'm going to say string first name as string. I'm going to say string last name as string. Okay. Then up here, if you notice down here, I still have like this super crazy spacing. And I'm about to extract a first name and a last name. And I don't really want to deal with this like messy string. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to apply the trim function to it. Just so that I don't have any of these ugly leading or trailing spaces. So now if I run this, you should see. Oh, I need to say when I'm debug.printing string name. So here, if I run this, you'll see now it's just Michael Jackson without any of the trailing, leading or trailing blanks. All right. I should have done a very brief introduction to this question, and the introduction is that this entire question is asking you about VBA string functions, basically, and message boxes and input boxes. So you're going to want to feel comfortable for tomorrow with these ucase, trim, in-string. We'll be using a lot of those for this problem. Okay, so now I need to actually set our name. So I'm going to set string first name is equal to, okay, do I have any proposals of what string function we should use to get the first name? Left, yeah. Okay, so left, and then we specifically want what string name, and we want to know how long this should be. Okay, but we don't know how long the first name will be. But there's a way we can find out, and the way that we find out how long the first name is we can look for the first position of a space, right? Does that make sense? Like we can look for where this first space is in search. And so do you guys remember what I could use for that? In string, correct. In string. And then I'm going to start at the first position. And then what string am I looking for? I'm looking for specifically where there is that space within the string. And then, wait, am I doing this correctly? I need to pull out my summary sheet. Let's see. String name. Well, here I need to get it. So I need to get the string name. Let's see. Let's look at our functions at our summary sheet. So this returns the position of the text. Okay, so I'm looking to start at the first position. I'm looking for the first space of the string. Okay, so I see. So this would be, I'm starting at the first position of the string, which is string name. Yeah, thank you. So string name. And then I'm looking specifically for the first blank space, right? And then for this, I need to subtract off 1 because I don't know if this works. I don't think so. So what's happening is it's saying that I want to start from the left of this whole entire string, and I want to look for then the first position where I see a space, right? So it's going to count. Strings are based starting at 1. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And it's going to give me back 8 for this portion. So right now I'm looking for the left portion of string, the first 8 letters, which includes the space. But I don't want the space in the string name, so I have to subtract 1 from this right here and close that off, okay? Let's see if I did that correctly. String first name, left. In string. I did not. Okay. Let's see. Extract string left. Did I do in string reverse? No, I need to. In string reverse. Let's see. And then this is just What am I doing? Okay, let's see. Let me consult the key. Left in string, one string full, space. This is what we had, right? In string, one string full, space. One. Space. Does anyone see the issue? In string. Um, I don't see the issue. I see the same as what he has too. String. What am I doing? He has what I have. So it's something with my debug.print maybe, or am I printing this one? I think I am. 1 second. Okay, I was just printing from earlier in the code. Sorry, I was going crazy. Okay, I hope that didn't confuse anyone. I was just printing it wrong to the console. Does this make sense, what we're doing in this line with the string manipulations? Okay. Okay, so now let's move on. Hopefully a little smoother. So now we're going to do the same thing, but with the last name. And the last name should not have any blanks. Okay, so I want it now from the right, probably. And I want it starting at the space, at a space. And so I'm going to look for where, let's see. I think I want in string reverse again, potentially. In string, what does he have? Okay, he has the mid function. Mid. So we have our string name, and then where we want to start within the string. And so I want to find that one space in between the name. And then I want to know how long it will be to the end of the string. But I think I can just leave it potentially because it should go all the way. Let's see. Okay, who objects to what I just wrote? Debug.print string fn. This should be last name. Last name. Sorry, say it again. Yes, yes. Thank you. So I need to trim here. I can start with a trim here, right? Trim. It here. String last name. Let's see. Okay. Jackson, but there's a 1. Trim. Okay, so I'm starting from the middle of the string for string name, and I'm looking for where the first space is. I shouldn't subtract 1, you're correct. So I'm looking for wherever the first space is, and I'm going from, I should add 1, right? Because you're going to find that first space, and then you're looking for the last name, right? So from there, I'll add, and then this should work, hopefully. Jackson. Okay, with no leading or trailing. Okay, so in-string reverse is something that I haven't done in too long. I'm sorry, guys, that I'm resting on that. But here, what we're doing essentially is we're finding the position where this space is happening, and then we're either moving to the left or the right of that space, depending on what side we're trying to capture of the string. And then we're using that with these left and mid functions to return that part of the string. Does that make sense? Yes. So that's why it's good to trim it. But yeah, this only works if there's nothing before or after, because no matter what, like if your name is like space, 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 Bob, well, then whenever I'm looking to start at the first character is a space, and the second and the third is a space. So this would not work. Yes. Yeah, could find the space. Space, so it would be right and how many over that you want. So it would be a -1, right? Because you're starting from the right end of the string. And then let's say you just want the last 3 characters. So let's say the third one back is a space. So you would count back 1, 2, 3, but you don't want that space included. So you'd have to subtract 1 off. So the length is 2. Does that make sense? Okay, yes. Yeah, you could. And that you get full points for sure. Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Yes. So it says first to assign. So that's why you need these variables. And then it says it shouldn't have any blanks. Okay. So let's see. Oh, is it from get the first name and the last name? So like we know it said at the beginning, it gave us this weird looking Michael Jackson name and says we need to then get the first name and last name. So basically like it's just asking us to clean it up. So you have to then like get just the Michael part first and then just the Jackson part second. So it's like we know that we need to manipulate the string. We need to clean it up. And that's what this is doing, is cleaning it up. So like he'll never say, or like he most likely will never say, unless it's a hint, like use the mid function to do this. He's going to say like, I need a string that looks like this, and you have to figure out which functions to use. This is, so we identified where the space was. So we had Michael and then spaces. So we identified where the space was in Michael, but we wanted to return the length that we wanted to print of that string. And if we return the length including the space, then that would mean that the first name would be set equal to Michael's space, but we don't need the space in there. So we subtracted 1 out. Okay. All right. So now using an input box, ask the user to enter her birth date and assume that the user does not enter a correct date. Oh, if they don't, then you don't have to check. It's not a big deal. Okay. So input boxes, I'm going to put input box and then a parenthesis. Remember, input boxes capture feedback from the user. It captures input. And so you have to use these parentheses because it's an actual function, right? It takes something in and collects something from the user. So I'm going to put a parentheses and then the prompt, it says enter your birthday in this format. So I'm just going to copy from what he said. Input, enter your birthday. Okay. And then I'm going to this gives you little prompts. So now with the title, remember he said early in the problem as the first thing to always put your name in the title. And so I'm just going to put my name here, and you should do as well for all of your input and message boxes. And then it's asking what type of information is this? Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So here, I'm just going to stop it here for now. And then I'll go back to that. Thank you for catching that. So, and have the first letter capitalized and all of the other letters lowercase. Okay. So I'm going to say, these are both the strings. There's multiple ways that you can do this. I can say, equals, or I can say, first I want to just get the first character. So I can say left of the string, or I'm going to do it outside of this so it doesn't get messy. So I'll say string first name is equal to, and I'm going to go from the left and I'm going to take string first name and just the first character. And of this character, I want to make it uppercase, right? So I'm going to say U case. These are all on the summary sheet. And then I'm going to say, and the rest of it is going to be lowercase. So an L case, and then the same thing left of the string, starting at, or here I'm going to say, I'll say mid of the string I can use. And I'm looking at string first name again. I'm going to start at the second position, and I don't have to put in a final argument because I'm going to go all the way until that string is done. So, see, this needs to be commented. Now that I'm realizing, he probably did a simpler way. Let's see, Jackson. So, bug.print, let's do first name and run this. Michael, okay, so that gives it to us in the format that we want. Does that make sense? Okay, let's see if he did it in a much easier way, potentially. No, it looks like he didn't do this. So I think he missed it too. Okay, so good catch. Yeah, go ahead. So this, he said he wants the first letter capitalized and the rest not capitalized. So here I'm saying I want to take the left part of the first name, and I want to just have it length of 1, right? So I have Jackson, I'm just going to go 1 letter and stop. So 1, just the J. And then on that J, I'm casting this U case to it. So I'm making the J capitalized. Now, what we have left, we want to just look at ISEN. So I can say and then this is the mid function, and the mid function's arguments are what string it takes in, where it starts, and how long it goes for. And so I put in the name, and then I'm looking for it to be to start at the second position. So it's going J is 1, A is 2. So mid is starting at A, and then here there's an implicit comma, right? And then it tells you how long. And so here, like if I said 3, then it would only make the A and the C capitalized, right? The second and third position. But I just didn't include it because the default is that it will go all the way to the end of the string. And so this then makes all of that lowercase. Does that answer your question? Okay, yeah. This is concatenation. So if you have, that's a good question. So if you have strings, you use the ampersand, because you're pushing words together. And then if it's anything with like numbers, anything numerical, you use the plus. So like if you have like 2 + 2 = 4, you would use the plus. But if you have 2 and 2, then it would give you back 22. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, because there's different arguments. So like here, if I say, like when you type, it should give you the default. And so like left only takes in 2 arguments. So like nothing's implicitly happening here. It's just like you're starting at position 1, always with left. You're starting at the leftmost position and moving a certain length. And so here I only wanted to move 1, versus mid has 3 parameters. See, it has the string, where it starts, and how long it goes for. And if you see the brackets, that means it's like a default, where if you don't set it, it's just implicitly going to set it for you. Yeah, oh, sorry, I saw your hand up. Do you still have the same question? You're good, okay. The last, yeah. So last name. So, wait, sorry? Yes, so you'll do the exact same thing as above, string last name, and the like literally the exact same thing, you just change first name to last name. And then if I change this to string last name, you get Jackson. Does that make sense? Like, so if it's confusing, it's because before we had like the whole like ugly looking, we had like Michael spaces, then Jackson, all uppercase, all messed up. Then we put just Michael into the first name, and then we put just Jackson into the last name. So these are 2 separate, like clean looking names. They just have weird capitalization. And then what I did here is I'm just changing the first letter to uppercase and all the rest to lowercase. And so like I'm already dealing with those cleaner looking strings. So that's why I don't have to like change now from left to right or anything like that, because in both cases, we're starting at position 1. For the first name, we're starting at position 1, which is Michael and M. And then for last name, we're starting at position 1, which is J, Jackson. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Okay, so now using an input box. So we started this input box, asks the user to enter her birthday. Okay, so enter your birthday, and then you put your name. And then it's going to ask you for some, like what specifically this is asking for. And so, wait, let's see, comma. So you put your name. And then I was expecting to have some kind of prompt, but maybe I'm typing something wrong here. Input box, enter your birth date. Okay, well, he doesn't ask for now. Right, because this is capturing input from the user. Thank you. And it has to be set equal to some input. And so birth date, we can just call, I don't know, what do you guys want to call it? Birth date? No, B day. What do you want to call it? B day? B day. Okay. We should probably call it string B day. Okay. And then I have to actually input that as a string, right? So up here, I'm going to dimension it. So I'm going to say string bday as string. Don't forget to do that. But option explicit will catch us if we don't. Okay, so now if I run this, it's going to say enter your birthday, right? Okay, and it took it. And now if I'm curious what string bday is, then it should tell me, but see. If I go up to string bday, yeah, see, it's stored in that variable. Does that make sense? So input captures what the user gives to you and you put it into a variable then. Okay. And the awesome thing is we don't have to check if the input is valid. So now we can move on. So check that the user inputs are valid with exactly 10 characters. If the value has more or less than 10 characters, show a message box with an exclamation mark and a message. The value is not cool. Okay, and stop the program. Stop the program. That should be something that I'm thinking, okay, what words I'm going to use? Probably exit sub, because I'm leaving the entire program. Okay, so let's do that. So we can say we're going to check. We're using if statements now, right? We're checking if it's good versus if it's bad. So first I want to say if the string bday, and what am I checking? I'm checking if the length is 10 or if it's something different than 10. So when I want to get the length of a string, what do I use? Len, right? And we have string bday. And then I want to say if it's not 10. So I use this symbol that's like different than 10. And then you have the then keyword. But don't let that trip you up. This is like the exact same thing as you could say, if it's less than 10 or if it's greater than 10, then, and this is the exact same thing, right? This is just like a little shortcut. This just means if the length of the value is different than 10. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so if it's different, then I need to do a message box, it says. So I'm going to say message box. Here, tell me, do I need to put a parenthesis or do I not need to put a parenthesis after message box? No, because I use the parentheses when it's acting as a function and when I need to then set that equal to a variable that are used throughout my code. Here, I literally just want something to pop up to the user. I'm not going to do anything with it. I just want to say, that's not a real birthday and get out of here. So here I'll say message box. And the prompt is, he says the value is not valid. Okay, so I'm going to copy this in here and say the value is not a valid month, day, year. Okay, but then here he wants us to actually replace it by what the value is that they put. So here's where we can do string concatenation. And so I can say the value and then here I want to put in the actual value that they put. So string bday. And then I'll have is not a valid month, day, year. And I have to always have an end if. So here I'll have end if, and it's nice to indent. So when I run this and I say happy B-Day, well, was that 10? Happy? No way. It's 10. What are the odds? Okay. So I'm going to say hi. The value hi is not a valid month, day, year. Here I have some weird spacing going on. So I'm going to say the value space, and then here I need to add a little space because here this is where it's pasting in high, right? And so here I'll say high, and it's going to tell me the value high is not a valid month, day, year. Okay, is that clear? No, unless it's like, unless he's like, be careful, but no, yeah, we're not mean. Like we want y'all to get good scores. So like if we see you understand what you're doing and it's just like a typo, like if you misspell your name or something, then that's fine, you know, it's not a big deal. If the spacing's a little off, it's fine. But what we would want to see here is that you did put in the variable instead of just having like that. He had like hashtag, 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 you know, in his message box. So we want to see that you know how to take a variable and put that into a message box to show. And then here, the other thing that I want to say is I want to, he says he wants it to be a exclamation mark entered. So this next one where it's, you have different buttons, I think I can say VB information and it will make it, have this exclamation mark. So I'll try hi. And oh, that's not an exclamation mark. Oh, information. It's exclamation. 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 Did I spell that right? Yeah. Okay. So I run it. And there's our exclamation mark. Does that make sense? Cool. Yes. So you can, yeah. It's not, I think it'll still return everything just fine, potentially, or maybe it'll treat it like a function and it'll be like, what are you setting this equal to? Let's see. Good question. Yeah, see, it said expected equals. So you can't, like, you only put the parentheses if you're trying to actually get the values back and set it equal to a variable. So you always have to have the equal if you have the parentheses. Okay, good question. Okay, is anyone on the Zoom? Is it still going? Because I don't see the little yellow edges. Hopefully it's okay. Okay, well, that's scary. All right. So, any other questions before we move on? Yeah. So that's nice. Okay. So, I think we did all of this correctly. I don't think I missed anything. Okay, so now we're gonna go down to E. Show a message box. Okay, cool. You should love message boxes because they're very straightforward. So message box with yes, no, and cancel buttons asking the user, do you want to use the birth month? Yes, no, or cancel. So I'm going to say, what? Oh, good. Okay, okay, awesome. Also, can you tell me if there's been like messages? I don't know. I'm not in the chat, but wait, it just popped up on mine. Okay, sorry, someone just had a question. No? Okay. So I'm gonna say message box. Yeah, let me know if there's a ton of questions. Are there? Okay, also it may get, I don't know if there's, how many people are in here? Sorry, not to be like exposing y'all. Okay, I guess if there's an answer that's like really, you have a burning question, unmute yourself and it'll be like the voice of God in here. Okay, so message box. And now I'm going to say the prompt. So I just got loud. Do you want to use the birth month? And then I'm going to just copy this in so I don't have to type everything. Yes, no, or cancel. But I don't actually want to type that in because I just want to do it as buttons. So I'm going to say comma. And then this is the buttons as VB message box style. And so here I have VB and there's a yes, no, cancel option. And if you're unsure of that, you can look at your summary sheet. And if you're still unsure of that, you can scroll through and look at these options here. Okay, yes. Oh, for them, what? Yeah, question. I think we have a question. Okay. Yes, no, cancel. And then remember title, put your name. Okay. All right. So whenever we pass this in, we are now wanting to do something. It says if the answer is yes, then so-and-so. If the answer is no, so-and-so. So what is not going to work about what I just did going forward in the code? Anyone? Yeah, I need to set it equal to a variable and use parentheses because so basically they're going to be clicking yes, no, or cancel, and there's some values implicitly connected to those. So I don't know what they are in VBA, but it could be like, let's say yes is 1, no is 2, cancel is 3. And so I want to capture that number so that I can then determine what I'm going to do in my code. So here I'm going to say, I don't know what I should call it. Any suggestions? VB answer, maybe? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't use VB. I'm just going to say, what? Anyone? Answer. Amazing. Okay. Answer. And what is it going to be? It's probably going to be an integer. Int answer equals message box. And then I'm going to use those parentheses because it's a function. Parentheses at the end. And now I have an answer. And I have to go back up to the top because I just introduced a new variable. And I have to say int answer as integer. Okay. So I'm going to scroll back down. And here this will capture whatever they select. So now if the answer is yes, form a 6-character password as follows. Okay, so I'm going to give myself some space here. And I'm going to say if int answer is equal to yes. But this int answer took on some random value that I don't know what it is, an integer value. So if you know it by heart, then that's great. You can put it. I'm just going to say if int answer is equal to VB yes, right? Because that VBA recognizes that as a specific integer. So you can just call that. I'll say end if here for now. Okay. So if the answer that they put in is VB yes, then we have first and second characters set to uppercase of the first 2 characters of the last name. Okay, so basically with all of these, we're generating a password, right? And so I want to go ahead to the top and I'm going to say, I'm going to dim a string pass as password. So string pass as string. Okay, I'll scroll back down. And so if it's yes, then I'm going to send string pass equal to something. And so here, I first want to get the uppercase of the first 2 characters of the last name. So I'm going to say ucase. Now I'm looking specifically at the last name. So I'm going to say a string last name, right? That's the variable that we had for that. And then I'm going to do, but first I want to specifically look at the first 2 characters. So I'm starting from the left side, right? So I'll say the left. And then I'm looking specifically at the last name. So string last name is what we called it. And just, I want that length to be 2. So if I do debug.print string pass, we can check and see how we're doing so far. I'll clear all this. I'll run it. And then remember, we're in the if statement where I click yes. And then here it gets the first 2 of the last name, J-A. So it's working as we intended. Does anyone remember, there's something it asks us to, I'll just tell you, I don't know if we're going to get there. So it asks us to exit the program if they didn't put in a valid birthday. And I just realized when we went through that, we missed that step. And so here it says, if it's different than 10, if the length is, then exit the program. And so here I'm going to say exit sub. Okay. And what that does is it just takes you out of it stops running any code within this sub if they put in something other than a length of 10. Okay. So we'll scroll down. And so we handled this first and second character. Now I'm going to string concatenate, and we're looking at the third and fourth, and it wants the lowercase of the last 2 characters of the last name. So I'm going to say L case, Now it's the last two characters. So I'm going to say starting from the right, I'm looking specifically at the first name. So string first name, and it's two characters again. All right. So we're done with that. And then finally, it says for the fifth and sixth characters, get 2 digits of the birth month. So here I'm going to say the birth month, we have month / day / year. So I want the first two of string birthday, right? That's what we called it, string b-day. So I'm going to say left, and then the string we called string b-day. And I want it just to be the first two because the first two characters are month. So I'll do 2 here. And then here, just for convenience, I'm going to do message box. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to say message box string pass, just so that it should tell us if we did it correctly or not. So I'm going to put in my birthday, and then I'm going to put in yes, and then it gives us string pass because I put it in these quotation marks. So that's not very helpful. So we want as the variable, and so I'll run it again. I'll say yes. And here we are, the first two. So we have the first two characters of the last name, J.A. We have lowercase, the last two letters of the first name, Michael. So the last two are E.L. lowercase. And then we have the month. And the month we put in was October, so we have 10. So that's our password. All right, so I'm going to delete that message box because he didn't ask for it. And then we can move on. Okay, so any questions on that? Because these next two are going to be pretty quick because they're very similar. Okay, so now I'm just going to copy because copy is your friend on a time exam. And I can say if an answer equals VB no, then it says create a 6-character password just as above, except that the 2 digits of the birth month are replaced with the 2 digits for the birth day. So we had, remember, month / day / year. So I want to start at the day and just have it be a length of 2. So I can use the mid function, right? Because I'm not starting at the very first position. I'm starting at a set position. So I'm going to say, and here I'll say mid. And then the string that we're looking at is string b-day. I want to start where? Okay, it's month / day is the first one. So m / d will be the fourth one, right? So I want to start at the 4th position, and I want the string length to be of 2. Does that make sense how I got 4 and 2 using the mid function? Okay, you could also do, like, if you wanted to make it more complex for no reason, you could get what's in between the slashes, but I would not advise doing that if you could think of this easier way. Okay, so we're done with that one. That was very easy. And then we can do another down here. If the answer is cancel, then create a 6-character password with the first character being a randomly chosen letter from the first name. So first, I'm just going to do if and answer equals VB cancel. Then we have, let's see what it's asking us to do. So a randomly chosen letter from the first name, followed by a randomly chosen letter from the last name, and then the 4 digits for the year of the birth date. So the year is going to be the easiest part. So I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to say we're starting from the right of string b-day, and we're going over 4. And that'll give us that last part. And then here, we're getting the first characters, but it's involving some kind of random numbers. So I'll say this is going to be, okay, so we want randomly chosen letter from the first name, followed by a randomly chosen letter from the last name. So I think we could probably use whatever you want. I'm going to use mid. I'm not sure if you use mid or not, but I'm going to say mid, and I'm looking first at a randomly chosen letter from the first name. So I'll say string first name. And where do I want to start? Well, this is like the question mark. That's what we're trying to find out, right? It's a random variable. And then we want it to just be 1 letter. So the length is just going to be 1. Okay. And then this is just like pseudocode. So don't type in the question mark and expect it to run. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, but it's going to be for the last name, right? Randomly chosen from the last name. Yeah. So this is going to be string last name. And it's just 1. So we need to fill in the question mark parts. So here's where we can use our rand between function. So you'll find this on your summary sheet. And I think he even tells you here maybe as a hint, use Excel function rand between. So whenever you see ran between, or sorry, whenever you see Excel function, that means you're using the worksheet function keyword, right? Because then you're clicking into worksheet function and you're looking at everything that Excel has to offer in terms of formulas. So I'm going to say worksheet function dot and then ran between like he told us. And I want that to be somewhere between 1 and the length of the string is what he said. So I'm going to say length of string first name. Then I'm going to copy this exact same thing here into this other question mark. And I'm going to say, but make this one be string last name. Ran between right here, string first name, length of string first name. Right here, yeah. That's what you're saying? Yeah. Oh. Let me do this. You guys know if you, oh. Oh, thank you. And, oh boy. Run between 1. Oh, right here. Thank you. Okay. So the way that I would advise not making a mistake like that is you could individually set a variable. So you could have like a random integer for the first name and a random integer for the last name. So just like call 2 integers that are randomly set. So let's say it runs and it gets like 2 and 7. And then in that argument, you could just put in that variable name. I can show after that as well, but why am I running it? I don't think we need to run it. So no. Okay. So there we go. And then print the final password in cell A3 of problem 3 worksheet. Okay. So I'm going to do problem 3. So the code name of problem 3 is S3 dot, and we're looking at range A3 specifically. And we're setting that value equal to string pass. And then finally display a message box with the time. We'll do that in a second, but let's make sure that our cases are working. So I want to use birth month first. Okay, that's the password that we expected that we ran earlier. So now if I say, again, birthday and no, this wanted the same thing, but it wanted with the day, and the day that we put in was the 18th, so that's correct as well. And now we're going to run it with cancel. Cancel. And remember, this was lowercase and then the full, no, this was 2 random letters, first of the first and then of the last, and then the full year. So that is what we expected. And so now this is something that he probably went over this week in class, hopefully. Oh, yesterday. Okay. So everybody buckle up. This is like, it's for sure going to be on the exam. But it's actually really helpful. I've like used it actually like in internships to see like if my code is screwed up, how long it's actually taking. It's useful and you're gonna have to do it all semester long. So now is the time to learn it well. So the idea first, I'm gonna type out the idea. So at the beginning of our code, we need to start a timer at beginning of the sub running, right? And then when we get to this end of the sub, after everything has been carried out, we need to then collect the time at the end of the sub. And then what you can do is you can just subtract to get the duration. So basically how long you're actually in the sub. And so the way that you do this is there's a function called timer in VBA. So here I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to do it, I think, just like he does it, just consistently all throughout. This is how I do it, even on my own outside of this class. But you dim a single because you're going to get really, really big values. I'm pretty sure it's in milliseconds. So like they can be really big values. So you're going to use single. So I'm going to call it single T0, like single time starting at 0. And I'm going to say as single. Okay. And then remember at the very beginning, first thing that your code does is it needs to collect the time at the beginning of your code, because then you're going to compare it to the time at the end. So I'm going to say single T0 equals timer, equals timer. Okay, timer, this is just something you have to memorize, and maybe, I think it's on the summary sheet, but you just have to remember timer is a function that basically gives you the time since like midnight in milliseconds or something crazy like that. But it's basically just giving you a timestamp of when you first run it. So initially we run our sub, and the very first thing that our sub does before anything else runs or takes time to do anything is it makes this single T0, it stamps it with a certain time. Then we're going to go down here, and we are going to display this difference, right? And so we want it in a message box. But first, I'm just going to put the time expression. So timer, we called at the very beginning, and it gave us the time then. Now we want to know the time now so that we can subtract the difference. So I can just call timer again, right? Because if I call timer again, then it's giving me the time now at the end of the sub. And I can subtract out the time at the beginning, which was single T0. And so if I go ahead and do that, remember I said it's in milliseconds, I think. Is it milliseconds? Seconds. Okay. So I can do message box. The thing that stinks about this is that it's going to give me, I have to go through everything. Or I guess I could just say hi again and make it quick. Hi. Okay. Sorry. Oh, shoot. Okay, I'm just going to take that out to save us time. Here we go. Good catch. Okay, so I'm just going to say hi. And then it's telling me, oh, look what we did. Okay, so there we go. When I hit X, this is how long it took. So it took, that was 8 seconds. And so it's giving it to me in seconds. And so I want it in minutes that he asked for. So I can just divide this by 60. And so then he just wants us to say here, start a timer, collect the time. So I can just say like, it took you, and then at the end I can say minutes to run this. Okay. So I can say hi, okay, and then exit out. And it says it took you 0.09 minutes to run this. Okay. If you don't have this memorized, I suggest you do it right now on your own. I suggest you take a picture of it. I think he has it in his like actual content too. Afterwards, if you want to take a picture of anything, just let me know. But okay, that's everything for tomorrow. Any questions about this timer or the last things that we went over? Okay, I'll be here for like a very long time if anyone has questions. But good luck. Get some sleep if you can. If you're like a coffee/caffeine drinker, I would advise having coffee or caffeine because I mean, they are kind of time intensive exams. This one, not as much. The second one will be pretty quick. But yeah, you can do it. Any other reminders, summary sheets, most important? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll take, oh yeah, question. The format will be like very similar to the practice exam. So the questions, the content won't be very similar to the practice exam, but like what you see in terms of like, it will look like an exam like this that you open with a cover sheet, and then it'll look like the practice exam looked like. This is not your exam, so don't worry. I haven't seen the exam. He doesn't show us. And then it's the questions just like what you saw on the PDF. It's just going to be a paper copy. But like the format of, you should expect 3 questions. The first will be pivot tables. The second and third will be in VBA. Does that answer your question? What? In VBA. I mean, he's gonna for sure ask you about string manipulations in the content that you've covered. But yeah, like it could be in a different format. Like it's probably not gonna be like a password question, but it'll be something that asks you to manipulate strings. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't seen the exam, so he could change it up, but yeah. Okay, everyone, thank you. Stay around if you have questions. I'll be here for a while and we can help you with whatever. I can't post the code, but I can let you take a picture of anything, or if you need, I can email you the code as well. Just come see me. Ran between. Yeah, go over it again, or a picture. Yeah. Okay, let me turn it off for the Zoom people. Thanks for coming on Zoom. Oh, wait, let me go to ran between. Right here? No. Let me scroll down. We have it right here. Let's see if I can make it a little bit. Yeah, give me 1 second to turn off the Zoom. We'll see if there's anything in the Zoom first and then turn it off. It has an error, but I just want you to be able to see all of it so you can take a picture. Basically, this just needs to be one line instead of two. Okay. Escape. Oh, here's the chat. Exit sub. Yeah, good catch. Can you go back to the code, please? Yes. And you can tell me if there's anything specific you want me to go back to. The bottom. Okay. Did you get the picture of ran between? Okay. All right. Oh, I don't know what's going on. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording. Good luck, everyone. Stop recording.